Hello, BookTube. All right, we're back for this library tour. We're doing a library tour, a tour of all my books, and we are doing there's an old bricked up fireplace here in the front room. We did the mantelpiece that's above that fireplace, and now we're doing, I put two bookcases in front of the fireplace itself. We're going to do those. They're crammed with books. Who knows how long it will take us. And I was worried about logistics, about the camera up on the mantle looking down, or maybe holding it in my hand or something like that. And my surly houseboy pointed out, we do have chairs. You could just clear off a chair, bring it over, and sit on it. Use a pen, Sideshow Bob. So he was right, and I did. So we're doing... I don't know how we're going to get through all this, but you seem to be interested. So, and it's helping me very much. These bookshelf tours are helping me by casting a cold eye on the stuff, on the books that I own. Very useful. Very, very useful for getting rid of said books. I have way too many books. So the goal, sort of, it's not, of course, the goal here is to share these books with you and to look at them myself. These videos are kind of fun, no matter what kind of a logistic challenge they pose. But a background goal, a goal in the background is to get rid of books. Ideally, I would like to drop 1,000, 2,000 books as a result of this library tour. It's already happening, so... but these shelves are all double and sometimes triple stacked, so we're going to have to deal with that. And the first one here, I think we'll do it just by the way we've done with library tours all along. We'll deal with the transverse and the stacked out books first and move them out of the way to clear the shelves in the back. Now, that is in itself a demonstration something drastic needs to happen here, because you should never have to move books to get at books. Maybe in the little book room I have a bookcase that's entirely devoted to mass market romances, and it's a normal bookcase, so it's made for hardcovers, which means it'd be a huge waste of space to single stack those books. But in a normal bookcase, when most of my books are hardcovers or trade paperbacks, you don't want books piled in front of them so high that you can't see them. You want to be able to see what they are without hunting for them. So a lot of these things need to change. A great deal of them need to change. For now, let's just do these crosswise books for this first one. And I have to warn you ahead of time, just in case you're all about new and shiny things. These are all classics. This entire video is classics. We'll go through them fairly quickly because we've dealt with classics ad nauseum on this channel. But these are all mass market paperbacks of classics that are not Penguin mass markets. They're classics that I have in other formats. And these first dozen or so are Oxford World Classics. Oxford they still do, a run of classics, much in the line of Penguin, only they hire different people to do the bibliographies, different people to do the notes, different people to do the introductions, and some of them are quite good. Some of them are really, really good. So I used to have hundreds of them, probably close to a whole collection. I don't anymore, though they have been dwindling. They need to dwindle more. Horrible rule of arithmetic. I'm trying to impose rules on my books. One horrible, pitiless rule is something that most book people rebel against just instinctively, which is that the fact that I liked a book is not sufficient reason for keeping it. But another reason is this fantasy that I'm ever going to go back to old introductions and notes and use them when a new version of the book they're reprinting comes along. I have had, I don't even know, countless opportunities to do that in the last 10 years. Countless opportunities to prove whether or not that's true. And it has virtually never been true. Virtually never. I always think I'm going to do it. I always think what a great idea that would be. Bring all your editions together and just breathe them all in. And inevitably the deadline creeps up and I end up writing the piece without that. So, like for instance, this is a perfect example. This is The Gallic War by Julius Caesar in an Oxford World Classics. A very nice edition, very good introduction, very good notes. The translation is by Carolyn Hammond, and there was recently a new translation of Caesar's War in Gaul, and I just assumed, okay, well, this is like the manager of the peanut factory in The Simpsons. We trained for this day. You all thought I was crazy. I just assumed that I would go to this, I would go to my Loeb Classical Library for the Gallic Wars, and I didn't. I didn't do it. I had 850 words, and I didn't do it. Which removes the necessity for this. because I'm not going to go back and read an English language translation of a Latin work on my own just for fun. It's almost certain not to happen. But anyway, there is the Gallic War of Julius Caesar. Then what? Okay, we have. So we have the beginning and the end, the flowering and the wilting of the life of the Roman poet Ovid, who wrote my favorite book, the Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is the love poems, and these are translated by A.D. Melville with notes by E.J. Kennedy. These are the love poems that made him the talk of the literary world, certainly the talk of Rome. No one could get enough of these things. They're racy and bawdy and confessional and scandalous, and also, as even Ovid's foremost critics had to admit, gorgeous. Just gorgeous. Just the obvious work of a metrical genius. And you don't. No offense to A.D. Melville, but you don't get any of that in this. Of course, you don't. You can't. Ovid was a master manipulator of the Latin language, and in order to translate him in the fullest sense of the word, translate, you would need. I don't even know. I don't even know what you would need. You would need. In Ovid's case, what would you need? Well, the closest thing, actually, he kind of knew it, is Kenneth Koch, who did a book on the art of love. Who did the closest? You would need a great poet in English to do it, and that almost never happens. The people who can translate the Latin accurately aren't great poets, and great poets can't translate the Latin accurately. So you don't get the what you need. That's why I've been sort of drifting away from translations, especially of verse. But that was the glorious beginning. That was Ovid doing what he needed to do, tapping into the current fads of literature in his day, and coming right to the top of the game, getting invited to all the best parties, getting to know all the right people, getting to meet and benefit from all the wealthiest patrons. And then you fast forward very little time, 10 years, to his poems from exile, when it was all over, when his access to the imperial confines on the Palatine had led him to see something that he shouldn't have seen, and then to say something that he shouldn't have said. He never elaborated on what that was, and history has been full of guesses, but it got him exiled. Augustus, the Roman Emperor Augustus, exiled him to Tomus, far beyond the reach of Roman law, far beyond the reach of the known world. And Augustus forgot him, left him there. Augustus was a sort of a literary parvenu on his own, and was often at literary gatherings and readings and whatnot, and held them often in his own palace. And never an occasion passed when someone didn't come up to him and say, is there any chance that you would, princeps, that you would be willing to bring Ovid back? He's very sorry. And the answer was always a firm no, usually without words, just turn on the heel and walk away. And whatever it was, it had to involve more than just Augustus, because when Augustus died, Tiberius faced his successor, the Emperor Tiberius, faced those same claims from people. Tiberius really wasn't much for literature and didn't go and do as many literary events, but he couldn't avoid the forum, at least while he was in Rome, and people would say, bring back Ovid, we want Ovid back, and he didn't do it. So it had to be severe, and it had to affect more than just Augustus. Because Tiberius wasn't particularly fond of Augustus and wouldn't have upheld an exile just to please his ghost. But there you have it. So you have opposite ends of Ovid. But it's a perfect example. If somebody were to tell me, if I were to learn tomorrow that The Sorrows of an Exile is coming out in a new edition, I would tell myself over and over again, oh well, you're going to consult that. You're going to consult the Oxford and the Penguin. And then when the time came, I wouldn't do it. So why are these things here? I don't know. Same thing with this one. This is my beloved Juvenal, Satires of Juvenal. This is translated by Neil Rudd, and I love his translation. He's very playful as English, and I love the introduction and the notes to this volume, but I haven't touched it in years. This is the Satyricon by Petronius. This also has... I believe this has the pumpkinification of Claudius, where Satyricon, Petronius, in this one, just asking to be put to death, he makes a poem, sort of a farce, on, like for instance, Ovid's Metamorphoses. At the end of Ovid's Metamorphoses, Ovid has Julius Caesar transforming into a god, and hard on the heels of Ovid predicting that he himself would transform into an immortal being. He was right about that, and in the pumpkinification of Claudius, Petronius has the Emperor Claudius transformed not into a god but into a pumpkin, and I think that's in here as well. But maybe not. Maybe that's the penguin I'm thinking of. But the fact that I don't know is a perfect reason why, to ask the question of why I have this thing. Why do I have this thing? Neil, who is the translation here is P.G. Walsh, and I'm sure that it's good in its way, but I'm not sure that I've ever read the translation. Pretty sure I've only ever consulted most of these things for their notes and introductions, rather than for the translator's bumbling attempts at. Okay, so this is Apollonius of Rhodes. This is the Golden Fleece, Jason and the Golden Fleece. This is translated by Richard Hunter. I have a much better version of the Argonautica in the little book room, and even so, if somebody came out with a new book, like a new novel on Jason and the Golden Fleece, or a new translation, I don't think I would even consult that much better translation in the other room, which has 100,000 times more notes and is a much more painstaking translation, much less consult this. So I just have these things. Okay, this next one is Le Rouge et Noir. This is the black and the red and the black by Stendhal in an Oxford World Classics paperback. This is translated by Catherine Slater with an introduction by Roger Pearson. And I think I really like the introduction. If I remember correctly to this, I really like the introduction. I have this, and I have the penguin of the I think the penguin is called the Scarlet and the Black. But the last two times, I think, for instance, that there is a new translation of this coming out in 2020 from Viking or something like that. I think it's going to be a big deal. If I remember correctly, I've already heard rumors that Stendhal is going to try and make a comeback in the States. And but even so, I can't imagine going back to this book. When I want to read Stendhal, which is fairly often, I don't do it in English. Why would I? Oh God! All right, here's another perfect example. I promise I'm not going to repeat this complaint forever. But we have another perfect example. This is Tacitus, the Histories. Tacitus is wonderful to read, and he actually doesn't lose much in English if the English translation is even halfway good. This is by W.H. Fife. With notes and revisions by D.S. Levine. I don't think I've read it. I don't think I've read it. I've read the Penguin Tacitus many times. I forget who translates that one, but I don't have it here. It's in the other room. But I read the Penguin Tacitus many times, and I've also read Tacitus many times without translation. I've had this. I mean, look at this. This is in perfect condition. This is probably 30 years old. I've never touched it. Okay, finally we have a work in English. This is The Last Chronicle of Barset by Anthony Trollope. And this is an occasion where the Oxford makes a difference, because Oxford did a centenary edition of Trollope. They reprinted almost everything. Some of his nonfiction they left out, but they reprinted every fiction, every novel, and his autobiography. And the people they gathered, the editorial project that they undertook for the introduction, for the notes, was immensely good. Just fantastic. Much as I hate to say it, much as it pains me, it was much better than the Penguin corresponding members, and also considerably better than the reprints that Oxford has come out with lately. The trade paperback white reprints, they've done one for all of the Barsetshire books, and they have different introductions and different notes, and every time that I've gone through them and compared them, I have found the older version of the Oxford to be the best, better than Penguin and better than the new Oxford. So I've kept some of them. But perfect example of the haphazard nature of all of this. I used to have all of the Oxford World Classics mass market Trollope, and I don't anymore. I got rid of them, and I don't know why I did that. I had to be aware when I got rid of them that they were a really superior edition, and I didn't seem to matter. So I only have a handful. Okay, all right. Here we have an edition. This is an edition edited and introduced by the loathsome A.N. Wilson of Dracula, with Bela Lugosi on the cover there. And I have many, many editions of Dracula. We're going to see some of them. I'm looking to see if I have one now. It's easily within reach. We're going to see some of them in this the tour of these bookcases. But when it comes to Dracula, I have probably 10 editions of Dracula. I have an illustrated edition. I have 2 annotated editions. I have the Penguin. I have the Oxford. I have an older Penguin. I have a deluxe Penguin. I have an old Magnum Easy Eye edition of Dracula, and there's no reason for that. There's no reason for me to have more than one edition of Dracula. Then we have selected writings by William Hazlitt. in the Oxford edition. This is a really good edition of Hazlitt, and right now, it's my only one. It's my only edition of Hazlitt. So, aside of course, from the free edition that I can get anytime I want on any one of a half dozen devices in this room. So, but in book form, it's my only Hazlitt at the moment. I keep dreaming that somebody will come out with a really great new selected Hazlitt with all of his nonfiction, all of his book reviews, all of his essays, and a whole bunch of his other stuff too, with a brand new introduction by somebody, maybe preferably who isn't A.N. Wilson, and that would be just the Hazlitt to have. If there's been a version like that from some university press in the last 10 years, I have just missed it, because I would love that. And then we have The Prime Minister by Anthony Trollope, again in this Oxford World Classics. We just got finished with a raucous read-along. Okay, we'll go back to translated works. This is Lucan, The Civil War. This is translated by Susan Brand. And I read her introduction, but I don't think I've ever read the translation itself. Then we have the Poetic Edda, translated by Carolyn Larrington. Notes, introductions, but even in Eddalong, the read-along that we did of Eddas, I don't think I consulted it. I don't think I did. Okay, then we have this neat, rather nicely done Oxford version of Trollope's autobiography, which he wrote and which was published posthumously, and did a lot to ding his reputation. A lot. Because I think it's fascinating, just fascinating, from beginning to end. But in the course of the autobiography, he's forever talking about how, I had to do this many pages and I got this much money and it wasn't enough, so I renegotiated, and maybe that was enough, but it would only be enough if I made this much money elsewhere. And the readers at the time did not want to read that about a writer's life. It ruined everything for them and made him seem like a grubbing carpet jobber. And he hasn't, in the popular imagination, really recovered from the publication of his own autobiography. And then we have, this is arguably the greatest Trollope novel. It's not my favorite, but I absolutely love it. This is The Way We Live Now. And this one is, I've reinforced it a couple of times, and I've used it. This one is one of these Oxford World Classics that I've actually used. I use it a lot. I go back to it all the time. It's just such a satisfying brick in the hand that I tend to just reread it when I'm rereading The Way We Live Now. And then lastly is The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, translated with an introduction by David Wright. And this is in the Oxford World Classics. But when I need Chaucer, I don't think I've ever gone back to the introduction and the notes, that when I'm canvassing introductions and notes, I don't think I've ever done it. I don't think I've ever included this volume. So I have I think 4 different Penguin editions of Chaucer, and then also Peter Ackroyd's weird contemporizing of Chaucer. And I also have Chaucer. I also have Chaucer the way he actually wrote, not translated into modern English. You lose something. And in Chaucer's case, it's unconscionable that you would lose something, because it doesn't take more than a couple of days to get the hang and learn the lingo of his own English, and then you don't need to worry about losing anything. But those are all of the Oxford World Classics on this transverse shelf. I should put them somewhere else, shouldn't I? Because we're going to want to do the shelf next. But we're still not done with classics. We'll just blast through these, because these are not Oxford classics. These are Signet classics with a couple of mentor classics tossed in. And if I don't go to the Oxford World Classics when they have notes, introductions that I theoretically would want to consult, then there's no reason why I would ever go to these things, because they have even less of that. So we have the Signet Pride and Prejudice, the Signet Anna Karenina, the Signet House of the Seven Gables. Now some of the cases I've kept these because I love the artwork. That is a wonderful cover to the House of Seven Gables. Look at that. And this is their classic Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain. This one I actually do reread in this form. Then they made a collection of Walden and Other Writings by Henry David Thoreau, and they bothered to take the picture at Walden Pond. And so this is, as you can see, this has been with me in a lot of different places. It's been battered all around. Then this is a mentor edition of Paradise Lost and Other Poems, and this is Edward Lecomte doing the notes, and the notes are superb. So I kept a version of this because Paradise Lost is an extremely elusive and eggheady poem, and so are all the other things. And Lecomte does a better job than any annotator I've ever seen at covering all of that. Nothing in Milton escapes him like it does so many other annotators. So this is one that I consult. So if you got, so in all of these we've got maybe 3 things that I actually do use. Then the Magnum Easy Eye, the Magnum Easy Eyes were an old paperback run, very cheaply made. Even with a ton of reinforcing, they don't stand up to reading. And this is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and I got it mainly for the wonderful cover art, even though the cover really annoys me. If Samuel Clemens had wanted to take credit for this book, he would have. Tom Sawyer was written by Mark Twain, not by Samuel Clemens. That drives me nuts. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen much anymore. Okay, here we have 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, again, just for the cover. And then The American by Henry James, again, mainly for the cover. I love the cover, although I don't have much Henry James. This may be the only copy of The American that I have. Then Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, Mark Twain, also cover. Just like the cover. The Wind in the Willows. No idea why I have this. I have 4 different editions, and they're all nicer than that one. The Idylls of the King, Alfred Lord Tennyson. This is a Mentor, I believe. No, this is an old signet, and this has been with me forever. I have used this copy to the exclusion of all others. This has been the one that I've used, so it would make the cut. Then we have the Satires of Juvenal. This is the Creekmore. Who is this? Yes, Hubert Creekmore. This is a much older translation of the same stuff that we saw, the Satires. Okay, then the Three Musketeers. There's a man with glove on the cover there. The House of Mirth, Edith Wharton. This old battered copy of Moby Dick. This has been with me a lot. I love it. Look at that. Look at that brooding cover. That is very nice. And The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, this time by Mark Twain, which is correct. And with the cover art from Big River. This was the poster that was for Big River, and when Big River was on Broadway, they brought out this paperback, and this has been around that long. I've just kept it. I'm a Big River fan. And there you have it. That is our first transverse shelf. So I'm going to put these books somewhere else to keep this shelf clear so that we can move on to the actual books that are on the shelf. We'll do that next time. So I hope this wasn't too boring. It was interesting for me in a way. But I'm going to wrap this up, and then we'll meet again. I have plenty of other book stuff to talk about, so I'll be back. I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.